Welcome back to the Day by Day Performance Podcast. For starters today, I want you to think about a time in which you felt immense pressure. Now, for the sake of the podcast, we're going to keep it more in the realm of sport and performance. Maybe it was a close game. Maybe it was what we call clutch time. Maybe you were trying to recover from injury or deal with something that had a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations to go with it. I'm curious as to what emotions might be coming up. Maybe it's doubt. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's that tight feeling in our chest we get when we're anxious. Maybe it is anxiety, right? If we're experiencing all this discomfort, we're probably going to go and think, man, how can I get rid of this discomfort as soon as possible? It's not really fun to sit with those feelings. So what do? You focus so much on trying to rid yourself of this fear, of these anxieties, of these things that you feel like might be holding you back, or warning signs flashing in front of you saying, I'm in danger, this is bad, send all help. We're viewing all these as problems and things that we want to avoid. Now, here's where things get tricky. A lot of times we focus and spend all of our mental energy on ridding ourselves of these, and I'd be interested to see how often that works. For some, you might be able to work through it really well, and that's awesome. But for a lot of folks, it seems like if this is my issue, I can't seem to tamp it down. I can't seem to quiet the voices inside my head, as a lot of people say. And so I want to introduce to you a different way that we approach things within sports psychology of how we can overcome these challenges. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy, otherwise known as ACT, A-C-T, ACT. It isn't about necessarily changing the thoughts and feelings we're having, but almost learning how to feel better by feeling better. Now, this might sound confusing, but essentially what we're focusing on is we want to feel better, but the way we're going to be doing that is by noticing how we're feeling, doing a better job of accepting what's there, and then continuing to move forward. I want to share a disclaimer that the contents of this podcast are intended for educational and informational purposes only. The thoughts and opinions expressed are solely my own and do not represent the official positions of my employer, my university, or any related organizations. Nothing shared in this podcast should be considered mental health treatment, clinical advice, or medical guidance. While we discuss topics related to performance, well-being, and psychology, the information is not a substitute for working with a qualified professional. Listeners should consult the appropriate licensed providers for individualized support. Thank you. If you're thinking back to that example I had you think of at the start, whether it be a stressful event in sport, something that might be weighing heavy on your mind, and then you're bringing up these fears, these doubts, the anxiety, the tightness in your chest. A way that we might typically think about it is ridding ourselves of that. Maybe it's changing the thought that we're having or putting a positive spin on things, but that might not work for everybody. And so the way I want us to think about this today is through a lens of accepting and committing to various things, which we're going to talk about in a bit. So why does ACT fit well in sport? Well, first of all, ACT fits in sport partially because sports are unpredictable and there's so much that is not within our control in the sport ecosystem. So when I'm working with an athlete, say they're a soccer player, and we're talking about their role on the field, they oftentimes might think, I have so much control over the outcome of a game. A very great way to challenge that is saying, really? Right? If you think about it, if you're an 11 on 11, how much control does one person have on the game? If we're thinking about it in a perfect fraction world, 1 out of 11 or 1 out of 22 for that matter, if you're considering the other team. There's so many other pieces of this puzzle that include players that make up the field and limit how much control you would have on the situation. And so what is helpful to think about is that in sports, since it is such an area where there's no control over lots of different things, you don't get to choose when pressure shows up. You don't get to choose how loud it might show up when it shows up at your door. You could start a game, it could be 0-0 till the 90th minute in soccer, or you could start a game down 3-0 after 5 minutes. You can't necessarily control what situation or environment you're going to be in, but it's what we do with that that's what makes the difference. And some other approaches, we might look at changing thoughts, changing the way we feel about things, and trying to reconstruct some things ourselves. But sometimes that can be really overwhelming, really exhausting, and kind of counterintuitive, right? We might be pulling our attention away from what we're trying to do in that moment. And so if you're somebody who's been kind of riddled with doubt, riddled with the anxiety, riddled with this fear, and you can't seem to shake those feelings, but you've tried everything you can, ACT might be an approach that is helpful for you in being able to shift your mindset to something that is more advantageous for yourself, a little more accepting of what your situation might be, and also just a different approach on life. So a couple of big things that ACT works with is, we could think about it as three basic understandings. One, that thoughts are going to be there, emotions are going to be there, and physical sensations or bodily sensations will be there. All those things will be present at any given moment. And what we're hoping to do is figure out how we can best perform while those things are there, whether they're positive is what we perceive it, or happy or joyful or excited, or if they what many of us consider negative to be, right? These stress, doubt, worry, fear, sadness. With ACT, we're focused less on what can I do to get rid of these things, but how can I accept it? How can I welcome it? And how can I continue to push forward towards my goal while feeling this way, or while thinking this way, or while having this bodily reaction? We can't necessarily control the thoughts that come into our head. We can't necessarily control at any moment what our body is going to tell us, right? Sometimes it has very automatic responses. But what we can control is how do we commit to keep going forward amidst kind of the mess that might be among us and how we perceive that. So being able to kind of work in that space is related to this concept called psychological flexibility. And that is really a core aspect of what ACT is all about. And so a lot of times we'll break things down into what we call a hexaflex. So if you think of like a hexagon, right? There's 6 different points to what ACT and the core values of ACT are. No pun intended if you're familiar with ACT. So I want to start by talking about this ACT hexaflex. The first piece of the ACT hexaflex I want to talk about is acceptance. Acceptance is something that, yes, it seems fairly intuitive with the name of ACT, but acceptance is something where we are making room for what might be uncomfortable or what might not be sitting well with us and the sensations that come with it, and simply letting it be. We're not trying to fight and change and alter what we're thinking, but instead welcoming what's there and not resisting, in a sense. There's a saying that what you resist persists. If we are out here thinking, don't think about failing, don't think about messing up, don't think about messing up, well, mine's completely on messing up rather than like, oh, go through, maybe it's the rhythm of my free throw process. Maybe I'm not thinking about where I'm positioning myself on a field, right? If all I'm thinking about is not making mistakes. So when we're kind of stuck in that pattern, it's really hard to accept things. So the starting point is just to acknowledge thoughts as they come up, recognize that they're trying to tell you something and they may not be the most helpful in that moment, and accepting that they're going to be there and you can still work within that space while feeling that way, while thinking that way, or having that bodily reaction. And so a big thing with acceptance is not that you have to like the thought or not that you have to believe the thought that's there. The key with this is just coexisting with it, allowing it to be present and still moving forward. So if I'm an athlete and I'm going to think back to when I was a runner, if any person who's ever ran in their life, whether it be across the room or 10Ks to marathons, if I have food in my stomach, it might, feel really upset if I try and do a hard workout, a hard run or something like that right after eating. So when your body's telling you, oh, like my stomach hurts, I should slow down, or it says my stomach hurts, oh no, I'm not going to be able to perform well, maybe before a race or a competition. If you're one to get nauseous, this probably resonates with you very well. When we're stuck in those positions, when we're saying, oh no, I don't feel well, or I'm feeling X, Y, or Z, it's about how do we accept that that's going to be there. So we might say, okay, my stomach hurts, and okay, I can still compete. I can still put effort forth. We're taking our attention away from the fact that, oh my gosh, my inner world is collapsing because my stomach hurts, or whatever the appropriate emotion or worry, feeling, thought, sensation might be. We're taking our attention away from that and putting it more towards accepting, okay, it's going to be there, but I can still move forward and do what I plan to do. So it's not fighting and saying, no, 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 don't feel bad. Don't have the stomach hurt. Don't, think these bad thoughts, quote unquote. It's about letting it be. And so big thing with ACT is it's asking you, can you still be here with these feelings? Can you still be here with these thoughts? They may be unpleasant. They may be disturbing even, but can you still be present with these thoughts? And so that's what I'm going to get into next with this concept of being present, this present moment awareness. Present moment awareness is kind of like our ability to stay grounded and bring attention to what's here, what's now, what matters in this moment. There's an acronym, WIN, WIN, what's important now. A lot of athletes learn about this because they're trying to stay present in the moment. If you're worried about previous performances, worried about future performances, or about, if we're sticking on the stomach example, how I felt 20 minutes ago before a race or a competition, we're not living in that present moment, and we're allowing our thoughts to be caught up with things that aren't within our control whatsoever. If we're able to focus on the present moment, you can go back to accepting the thoughts that are there. The key thing here is to have a non-judgmental approach by staying grounded in the present and focusing on what matters now. And every athlete has their ideal peak performance state. The reality is we often won't be living in that space. And I know that sounds not great to hear if you're like, man, I was really trying to learn about how I can be in this peak performance, how I can be in this flow state, and you're telling me I can't? And there's a lot of literature that shows that you don't spend a lot of time there, but it's about what we, make of that time that makes us perform our best and feel our best, is how we're capitalizing in those moments. But you're not going to be on your A game 100% of the time. That's just not realistic. But it's asking us if we can still be here in this moment while imperfect. It's the sense of we're not asking, can we be calm, but can we be here while not calm? Can we be here while not settled or anxious, perhaps? Right? We're going to be focusing a lot on what it means to be present in the moment. And sometimes this could be engaging in grounding techniques, things that really draw you into that present moment awareness, but something that also encapsulates the fact that you're not trying to change the situation. You're just bringing your mind to the moment and accepting it as it is. The next part of the Hexaflex we're talking about is cognitive diffusion. And I mean like diffusion as in like we're breaking away or defusing from these thoughts that we might be having or the beliefs that surround them. Right. So if you're thinking, man, I always screw this up, or I'm a screw up myself, I'm a failure, I let my team down, I, X, Y, and Z, right? These are very fused beliefs to what the thought is and our worth, our reality. And that can get very, very tricky. Right? So when we're trying to diffuse and pull these things away, it's acknowledging, okay, I might be experiencing this. So a great example is I'm having the thought that, insert belief here, instead of saying, I am blank. Okay, so an example, I'm having a thought that I'm the worst at this versus I'm the worst at this. You're taking yourself and kind of pulling yourself from within your own mind to holding your mind in your hand and saying, oh, I'm having a thought that this is happening. It can be a lot different when you're approaching it from this more zoomed out perspective. Now, we're not arguing with these thoughts and saying, well, why would you say you're the worst? Why would you say that you're going to screw this up? We're going to simply acknowledge, I'm having the thought. It doesn't mean that it has all the validity and truth to it. It doesn't mean that it's completely false. It's probably somewhere in the middle, somewhere in this gray zone. But I'm going to acknowledge that it's there and say, okay, can I keep going forward in doing what I want to do and set out to do, or my job to do, whether you want to do it or not? Can I keep moving forward? I think the best way that this shows up is in the sense of if we're having these like self-destructive thoughts, like I feel like I always screw up at the end of games, right? We're really attached to this I screw up at the end of games. I choke. I'm not clutch. Being able to change that and say, I'm having the thought that I'm not clutch. I'm having the thought that I won't perform at the end of the game. It doesn't deny that that thought's there or any of the facts that might support it if you're looking at stats. You're just accepting that the thought's there, you're noticing it, and you're not judging it. And that can be helpful when you remove it, kind of remove the thought and put it in your hands and say, oh, I'm having this thought that, or I noticed that X, Y, or Z. The next thing I want to talk about in the Hexaflex is what we call self as context. This is in contrast to what typically has people in a psychologically inflexible state, which would be self as content. So when we're looking at self as context, we're thinking of ourselves almost like a bowl or a vessel, right? If we're thinking of ourselves of a bowl and this bowl holds fruit, we're saying, I am this bowl and I am the receiver of these experiences, but I am not the contents that are within this bowl. So if I'm putting an orange in, I'm putting an apple in, this could be really ripe. This could be really not ripe, real rotten, right? That doesn't change the status of the bowl. It just changes the contents within inside, right? I might not eat the orange that's clearly rotten or have gone bad, or I might eat the apple that tastes really good and is perfectly in season. But it has nothing to do with the bowl that's holding it. And that's kind of what our experiences are, and that's how ACT kind of talks about our experiences, in that we are the holder of these emotions, we are the holder of these thoughts, we experience them, but we are not these thoughts. Okay, and so this kind of gets along the lines with diffusion from our cognitions and our thoughts, in that viewing self as context helps you kind of put the realistic lens on things in a situation. It's not saying I am the worst or I am a failure, I'm washed up. It's saying, I'm the one I'm experiencing this, I have experienced this in the past, or that my experiences are not tried and true to who I am. Things can always change, for better or for worse. But by viewing ourselves as the bowl and as this context, we're kind of stripping away the power that the thoughts and the feelings might have over us, and that ultimately take us out of the present moment and lead us to resisting and not accepting. So as you can already see, this hexaplex is kind of tying itself together, because we're talking about accepting the emotions that are there. We're talking about staying in that present moment. And we're also talking about diffusing our thoughts and viewing ourselves as context, right? Not as content. To get back to the previously mentioned pun, the fifth one we're going to be talking about in this hexaflex is called values, right? You might all know what values are. Well, values are a key and essential part to ACT. It's why I really love the theory and using it in my approaches, whether it be with myself or with clients that I work with. Using ACT as a foundation really emphasizes core values and learning more about yourself. So this can be really exciting to do when you're working with a professional, is being able to identify your own values and explore that for yourself and understand a little bit more of, why do I do the things I do and what values are driving these behaviors. Values are those things that show up for us no matter what the storm may bring. You could be sitting in your apartment and it's raining outside, but values are kind of like what holds up the outside of the house that keeps you dry or keeps the roof on. Values can serve in so many different ways, and by learning about our own values, we can figure out what works for us and what doesn't work for us, what is working and what is not working in our favor, and we can pivot and move forward from there. So one thing with values to kind of specify is that they're not goals. My values are not my goals. I might have a goal to have certain values, but my values are not inherently my goals. They're kind of these qualities or traits that you might exemplify in your daily life, regardless of what the outcome might be. If someone's going to be hardworking and they're on a winning team, that will look no different theoretically than somebody who values hardworking, or who values hard work and hardworkingness and is on a losing team. The value shows up no matter what the outcome is. That's what we want to focus on. So thinking about your own values can be helpful in getting through this. Now, why do values matter? Because when you're in those moments when emotions are loud or times are tough or you're on the losing team, your values are what show out and show through. That's what's going to keep you moving forward. When you think about, well, what do I have to be motivated about if, we haven't won a game all season, it's a long season, we're already out of the playoff mix, X, Y, Z, there's all these thoughts. Values are what keep you in the direction that you're going and keep you moving that way, because it's core to your belief system, core to your values of what matters to you. The last thing in the Hexaflex I'm going to talk about is committed action. So committed action I enjoy because it builds right off of values. We have these values, but what does it mean if we don't take action? And committed action is saying, can I be with all these thoughts? Can I be with all these feelings and continue to show up with the values that you might possess? Can you show up and commit to the action of doing things while it might feel hard? This is easier said than done. If you are someone who struggles with anxiety, whether at a clinical level or not, we've all experienced a moment of stress and anxious thinking at the very least. If you're someone who's experiencing this and you're just thinking, I don't want to experience this, I don't want the thought, I just want it to go away. Congrats. Lots of people have that thought. Lots of people feel that way. But what ACT is saying is, can you have those thoughts of, I'm overwhelmed, I'm feeling stressed about whatever it might be, and continue to show up with the thoughts present? And so committed action is where you kind of put it to the test and you say, yes, we're going to continue to, maybe it's show up on time, be hardworking, be respectful and kind no matter the circumstance. That's what puts your values to the test. And that is what's putting your committed action in a direction that is beneficial and healthy for you. So I want to kind of take us back and think about the roots of ACT. And so Stephen Hayes is pretty much the founder and father of ACT. And there's lots of great textbooks and writings that you can kind of familiarize yourself with on ACT. But that's also kind of why I'm here to talk you through that. One thing to acknowledge pretty early on in any kind of struggle is that there can be a little bit of liberation in what we call creative hopelessness. And that's showing up, whether it's for ourselves or if you're a clinician, showing up for a client and saying, hey, we have tried all these different things already. We are assuming that the client or the athlete, whoever, is making every attempt they can to alleviate themselves of whatever they feel is weighing them down. But up to this point, it hasn't worked. That's likely why somebody might be going to therapy, might be talking to a mental performance coach, might be listening to a podcast, this podcast, or any podcast, right? These are things that we assume that we are doing the best we can with what we've got, but it hasn't worked thus far. So accepting that this situation is what we'd call hopeless, and not in a way that's like, oh my God, everything's hopeless, but in a way that's saying, we're doing our best and this isn't working. And that's okay. Let's find something different. Let's try something new. And so that is where ACT comes in. Instead of saying, I'm trying to change this thought, or I'm trying to change the way I feel, I'm trying to deny or ignore everything, ACT says, all right, that clearly hasn't been working. Let's try this new approach. So to view ACT within the sport context, I want you to think about a couple things. One is an athlete able to accept nerves that are present? Is an athlete able to diffuse themselves from the beliefs that might surround the nerves that come up? So when I feel tension in my chest, my automatic thought might be, I can't breathe, I can't do this. But what we're trying to train ourselves to do is diffuse from that thought. So can we accept the nerves or the tightness in our chest, and can we diffuse from the thoughts that are connected with that? Are we able to anchor in the present moment? Are we able to view ourselves as context, as this bowl or this vessel for these emotions and thoughts and feelings that are coming in? Then are we able to reconnect with our value system and choose to move forward along with whatever thoughts, feelings, and anything else that might be there, accepting that they're present and simply letting them be? When we're able to kind of do all this, that's when we find ourselves in what we'd call a psychologically flexible state. Practicing psychological flexibility is something that can help alleviate your symptoms. And when we're stuck in situations when we're kind of looking up to the sky and being like, why is it raining? And resisting, we're in a psychologically inflexible state, likely, that is contributing to this. So that's when we go back to the 6 parts of that Hexaflex and say, how am I showing up? Where is my mind? Is it in the present? Is it not? Right? Am I accepting the thoughts? How am I viewing the thoughts? How is my relationship with them? And what are my values and what am I committing to doing? How am I showing up? All those factors go into this way of thinking and way of being that is ACT. Now, what's tough for a lot of people to hear is that ACT isn't promising comfort, but there is a little bit of freedom with it. You might be experiencing extreme discomfort, and ACT isn't here to come in and say, that's okay, the discomfort's leaving, or we can change this. We're sitting here and saying, okay, let's do X, Y, and Z anyways. Let's commit to our valued actions anyways. Let's find a way to accept what's there, view it without judgment, let it be, and move forward. So I want to finish this with kind of like a case study or like a vignette example of what this might look like in practice. Okay, so if we have a college soccer player, they are in what we'd call a position battle, something contentious where they're fighting for minutes, and they are given the opportunity to start one night. This is their big chance. A lot of eyes are on them. They start having this uncomfortable feeling of the pressure of everyone's eyes being on them. They're stuck in this big moment in the game when they have to perform, and they're feeling very, very anxious before the game about this. Maybe it's the role that they're cast within the team, within maybe the offensive plan, or maybe it's something under the defensive end where they're worried about letting up goals and they're worried about all the things that could go wrong and how they're going to cost their team. You can see their minds caught up in worry. They're caught up in a lot of doubt and anxiety. And what we're going to ask them to do, instead of saying, oh, I can't do this, or I'm going to screw up, or I'm going to blow my chance, is saying, can we experience these thoughts, accept that they are there, and continue anyways? Can we be anxious and can we still perform? Can we be nervous and can I still speak up so my teammates can hear me so I can receive the ball, pass the ball? Can I be uncomfortable, be queasy, be frustrated, and still show up by committing to the actions that I need to be a good teammate or be on the ball when I need to be? Can I still commit to showing up while feeling like this? Because you can score a goal whether you're anxious or not. You can also allow a goal if you're anxious or not. Those things aren't necessarily dependent on the feeling and emotional state. So how are we able to process and go through it while feeling that way? Say this player's going through the game and the first 2-3 touches they get on the ball really aren't quality touches in their eyes. They feel like they don't have, good pace with things. They feel like they're not connecting and they just don't have the same touch that they normally would. Their confidence starts to dip. They start having these self-defeating thoughts of, I'm just having a bad game. This is not good. I'm going to lose my starting spot. I'm screwed. Very quick way. We got from, I've had 2 or 3 missed touches to I'm feeling overwhelmed. And that's common for many people, is we walk ourselves into this deep hole or this spiral, as you want to call it, and we find ourselves stuck there. So what we want to ask is how we can reconnect with the present moment and take committed action. So if we are to ground ourselves in the present moment of saying, okay, maybe I've just had my 3rd touch and it wasn't the way I wanted to. What matters in this moment is I get into this position so I can receive the next pass for touch 4, because touch 4 could be better for all we know, or it could be worse for all we know. Really can't tell. But what can I do in this present moment to commit to the actions that will help my team? Especially if my values are being a good teammate or being hardworking. These are things that will influence how we show up in that present moment, but also accepting that, those doubts, they're going to be there, and I can still choose with the doubts present to run after the next ball or to get open for the next pass. The athlete can remind themselves in that moment that, oh, I am more than just this slump that I might be going through or these couple bad touches. I'm able to view myself as context, as this bowl, and say, oh, I'm having this thought that I'm going to mess up my next touch, or I'm having this thought that coach is going to pull me from the game any minute for the other person who's right on my tail. Or I'm having this thought that, man, I don't deserve this opportunity. By viewing ourselves as context, we notice all these thoughts we put in or put into the bowl that we are, right? And we're able to say, oh, I'm aware that that thought is present. I'm aware that the thought that I might get benched is there. It might feel really heavy, but I can notice it's there and recognize I don't need to do anything about it. It may not be fully true. It may not be worth my time, but I can simply accept that it is there, and whatever I do won't necessarily make it go away. So by just letting it exist, almost like, that scratch you might have on the back of your ear, and you're just like, don't scratch it, don't scratch it, don't scratch it, and then you scratch it. If you simply just focus on what the present moment's offering you, keeping yourself grounded in the present, looking at the values, and viewing yourself as this context, you might be able to better move forward. And sure enough, that itch, that scratch on the back of the ear, or that negative thought might lose some power, might lose its grip that it's holding to you when refused to those thoughts and not viewing ourselves as context. For this athlete, the game will continue going, and quite frankly, regardless of how it ends, they're hopefully being equipped with this new way of thinking about the issue at hand, so they can just better focus on what the task is. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be the best pick, you're going to be the right fit, that it's all going to work out. It's simply accepting what is and being okay with that. And when we're able to kind of separate ourselves, distance ourselves from the thoughts a bit, it removes some of the power and the weight they hold that can so heavily hold us down. And once we're kind of free of the weight of those thoughts that we fused ourselves to, by separating ourselves from them a bit and saying, okay, they're going to be here, but I'm going to live with them, you're able to better move forward and commit to what that next action is, or make that play, or take the risk, whatever it might be. The goal with ACT is not to achieve a perfect mental state. The goal with ACT is to acknowledge the thoughts, the feelings, and the sensations that we have, and continue doing whatever our action plan was anyways. That wraps things up for this episode. And if you have any questions, want to learn more, or see more examples and case studies about what an ACT perspective would look like when working with an athlete or as an athlete, feel free to send me a message. All my information is in the description, and I will see you on the next episode. Man. Hey, it's Patrick. Thanks for listening to the Day by Day Performance Podcast. If you're interested in learning more, go ahead and click the description on whatever you're listening to. You can find all the bios, links, and references from today's episode. Until the next time, hope you enjoyed the episode, and keep taking things day by day.